Welcome to Across the Balkans. Great to have you with us on the show. I'm Ludovica Brignola. Bosnia and Herzegovina marked the 28th anniversary of the Srebrenica Genocide by bidding farewell to dozens of newly identified victims of the war that took place in the 90s. Bosnian Serb forces carried out a campaign of ethnic cleansing and mass murder following the collapse of the former Yugoslavia. Around 100,000 people lost their lives and thousands of Bosnians went missing. After 28 years, families are still searching for their loved ones. Every year on July 11th, newly found victims are laid to rest at a memorial cemetery in Potocari in eastern Bosnia. Commemorations also took place in other countries, including Kosovo, Croatia, Montenegro, the UK and Turkiye. Let's take a closer look.
We'd be poor without the Muslims. It's good to have them around, but in a smaller concentration.
In the not-so-far future, that sarcasm would become a reality for the Muslims in Bosnia. The Bosnian War lasted almost 4 years and claimed more than 100,000 lives. But the Srebrenica Genocide turned out to be the conflict's lowest point. Bosnian Serb and Serbian units massacred more than 8,000 Muslim men and boys. It remains the worst genocide on European soil since the Holocaust. That's despite Srebrenica being declared a safe zone during the war. But the Dutch peacekeepers' presence did not stop Serbian General Ratko Mladic from capturing the area.
11. jula 1995. godine u srpskoj Srebrenici I napokon došao je trenutak da se posle bune protiv Dahija Turcima osvetimo na ovom prostoru.
The UN failed to protect the people, and worse still, handed them over to their would-be murderers. 30,000 women, elderly people, and children were also forcibly expelled, while Muslim Bosnian men and boys were transported to various locations and systematically killed, more than 8,000 of them. The horror became living evidence of the genocide.
Tada su se crvena kola zastavila, izišao je Ratko Mladić iz kola. Stajao je možda udaljeno jedno 4 metra od tije što će streljati od tog naroda i od tije mrtvije, posmatrao je. Ovi su izgonili iz tamića i strojili i postrojili ih. I kad se je tamić, kamion odmakao, oni su ih pobili sve rafalno.
And the bodies were buried in mass graves. 91 of them have since been found in Srebrenica alone. After spending years on the run, Mladic was arrested in 2011 and put on trial. But nearly 3 decades on, many families are still waiting to identify their loved ones, to at least give them a proper burial.
Joining me now from Tirana is Ardian Muhai. He's a research scientist at the Albanian Institute of History, specializing in war and conflict studies. Thank you very much for joining us today. So the Srebrenica genocide, although happening nearly 3 decades ago, is still a very hot-button political issue right now, especially within Bosnia and its relations with Serbia. What sort of differences and disputes are still lingering on today?
Actually, it is very sad that in this 28th anniversary of the Srebrenica Genocide commemoration, we're still identifying new victims, remains of new victims, and we are still confronting people who deny and not just their direct responsibility to the genocide, but the happening, the genocide itself. And the fact that every year new victims are being identified, and there are still significant numbers of victim remains not yet identified, means that the scale of tragedy it's not yet clear, and we don't have yet a proper, clear understanding of. We have a general view of what has happened, but the fact that we are uncovering new facts, new truths, and new parts of the tragedy, it's something that makes everybody sad. Those who are in the supporting side of the victims and not on the opposite side of denial. And this year, as never before, at least openly like this, Srebrenica genocide commemorations are occurring in a state of renewed Serb secessionist threats to the integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina as a state, and this makes the tragedy in a way being repeated, not in the same scale, but I think minimized in a scale.
And we'll go back to the genocide shortly. And as you say, still a high number of victims still being identified. But I want to talk a little bit about the Dayton Accord signed 30 years ago that we were talking about. What's the current perception of the organization of the Bosnian state that these accords determined, and what are the remaining challenges that need to be faced right now?
Now the irony of the fate is that the Dayton Accord agreement, let's say, is not being challenged from the victims' side. That to be just and honest, lost more from this accord, but is being challenged from the aggressors who, in a way, unjustly took what they shouldn't have taken. And this continues appetite to get more, even if they already got from the tragedy, it's a very, very wrong message, not just for the secessionists, not just for the Bosnian society, but as we know, the wrong message that was given in the Dayton Agreement, that through genocide, the political entity can benefit. This was something that backfired, and something that later was, let's say, a way of assuring the Milosevic regime to repeat the same project, genocidal project, 4 years later in Kosovo.
Right, and I do want to stop for a second and just talk about Ukraine. As the ongoing war in Ukraine, a very long conflict, is also sparking memories of the Balkan Wars from the 1990s. Do you think the international community is doing enough today to protect civilians in Ukraine?
I think that the Srebrenica genocide, Bosnian, Yugoslavia breakout wars, Kosovo war, are very much linked to the same problem that it happened. It's going to happen now, and we are witnessing in Ukraine. The hope that those who has a clear project to commit atrocities, to break international law, the hope that this is temporary, this is just momentum.
Right, and there are many similarities, as you say. Srebrenica, despite being a UN-protected safe zone, would still see the worst genocide in Europe since the Second World War. It was protected by 400 Dutch peacekeepers, but they failed to stop the killings. I wonder, has the world learned from that mistake or not?
I think that we didn't learn enough. Yes, there is a clear lesson that everybody learned, but we have to understand that at this time, the genocide did not happen yet. So there were hopes that the aggressor side will step back and will not carry out its evil project, the anti-human project to erase a whole community of civilian unarmed people. And this makes the lesson to be learned even more concrete, even more important, because we already know that it happened. At that time, probably there might be some excuses that we were hoping that they will not do this. But once we know that it already happened, we should not tolerate, international community should not tolerate any sparkle of thinking, of declarations, of projects, and of threats repeated in the same way. Because,
right.
Yes.
Republika Srpska officials still deny the genocide in Srebrenica, even though newly identified victims are being found, as we said, every year. How far apart is Republika Srpska with the rest of Bosnia and the world when it comes to recognizing the genocide? Will they change course in the near future? What do you think is the current level of awareness?
Denial of the genocide should not be left to the conscience. It has to be imposed by law. It has to be imposed by political means, by political actions, and because if we have to be clear that many of the perpetrators, of the people who took part in these atrocities are still are living in a normal life, and the number of the people that got to trial and were found guilty, it's at very, very little, a very small number. So we have to understand that it's not to be left to the conscience of the aggressor's side, but it has to be imposed.
Right, and we ran out of time, but thank you very much for joining us today for your analysis.
Thank you.
As trauma from the war remains, its political repercussions continue to threaten Bosnia's fragile post-war balance. Disputes over governing the country have been an issue between Bosnia's Serb entity, Republika Srpska, and Sarajevo since the Dayton Peace Agreement in 1995. The latest standoff erupted after Bosnia's High Representative Christian Schmidt annulled 2 laws adopted by ethnic Serbs that denied the authority of the Constitutional Court in Sarajevo. Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik initiated the vote after the court decided to change the rules to be able to convene and make decisions without Serb judges. Schmidt revoked Dodik's move, saying it directly violates the constitutional order of Bosnia and the Dayton peace deal that ended the Bosnian War. Dodik said the Serb entity doesn't recognize Schmidt as High Representative of his rulings. The Western-backed envoy also amended a law that penalizes those attacking state institutions. The US Embassy in Sarajevo has backed Schmidt's decision and warned against any unconstitutional and deliberate attacks on the terms of the peace agreement. To get more on this, I'm joined by Edina Bećirović. She is a professor at the Faculty of Criminal Justice, Criminology and Security Studies at the University of Sarajevo, and also the co-founder of the Atlantic Initiative Center for Security and Justice Research. Thank you very much for joining us. Professor, why are ethnic Serbs defying the Bosnian state? But also, can you help us understand what is the role of the Constitutional Court in Sarajevo that Serbs are denying?
Resistance to the state of Bosnia and Herzegovina, we can't really say that it comes from the Bosnian Serbs. It comes from the leadership of the Bosnian Serbs, who in cooperation with the political leadership from Serbia and with an enormous support of Russia, they have been persistently working for years on the idea that the Republika Srpska entity should secede from Bosnia and Herzegovina. So their actions are driven by the desire to finally achieve the war goals. Now they're trying it with political means, and that those war goals they had in 1990s included the expansion of the territory of the Republic of Serbia with the ultimate goal of establishing Greater Serbia. So it's really important to know that these, what some present as political local skirmishes, have much greater idea and historical roots which were visible in aggression and genocide against Bosniaks that began in Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1992 and culminated in genocide in Srebrenica in July 1995. So these actions against the constitutional courts are led by the Bosnian Serbs, but they have great support of Russia, which also has the interest to destabilize the whole of Western Balkans. And yesterday, it's important to remember that we marked the 28th anniversary of genocide in Srebrenica, which is being publicly denied and even celebrated in Serbia and Republika Srpska entity. Yeah.
And we were saying a minute ago, why does the Serb entity not recognize Christian Schmidt as the High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina? Dodik says the UN hasn't fully approved his post. Is that true in the first place?
This is not just a disagreement between Christian Schmidt and Milorad Dodik. I think many in analysts in the West are presenting it as his rebellion against Christian Schmidt as high representative. Milorad Dodik is at the political war with the entire Western international community, the USA, the UK, and the EU, with the exception of Hungary, and he has been waging this political war for years, and it's primarily based on different views on the future of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the balance of power within the country. Now, when he's been advocating for a greater autonomy within Bosnia and Herzegovina when he's tolerant, greater autonomy for Republika Srpska when he has what we called his tolerant days. But when he is openly aggressive, he advocates secession. So this is it's kind of underestimation to say that this is the war between Christian Schmidt and Milorad Dodik. In the end of the story, it would be really ironic that Russia in the Security Council has a voice to Russia, who is primarily who is waging aggressive war against Ukraine, and Russia that has an interest to destabilize the Western Balkans. It would be really ironic that Russia is the one who decides about the legitimacy of Christian Schmidt, and they're asked in the UN Security Council about the extension of the mandate of the High Representative Schmidt.
As you say, definitely very, very different views there. Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik initiated a vote for two laws that denied the authority of the Bosnian state. Schmidt says it violates the Dayton peace deal that ended the Bosnia war. What is he threatening to do in practice?
Well, literally what Milorad Dodik presently did, he, on the territory of the entity of Republika Srpska, he legalized, well, or paralegalized. I mean, they don't have you know, what he said, legalization is not in accordance with the constitutional court. But he rejected the decision of the constitutional court of the state and rejected the application of the decision of the High Representative. What he did, basically, he revoked the validity of the Dayton Peace Agreement. He annulled part of the peace agreement, annulled the institution of the state that was created by the Dayton Peace Agreement. So Bosnia and Herzegovina is in the most difficult crisis, which is no longer only political, it's also a security crisis. And what is he trying to do is to, there are a couple of scenarios. It's impossible to really predict what is going to happen. But what is he trying to do is to achieve secession in a peaceful way, to legitimize what the Republika Srpska conquered through genocide. So it's basically some kind, what he's advocating for is some kind of Cyprus model, and he's trying to do that in accordance.
Interesting, you mentioned, right, the Cyprus model, and as you were saying, Dodik does frequently call for the secession of Republika Srpska. Could he achieve his goal, though, in your opinion, or is this completely impractical?
There are several options. What he is planning to do is go step by step to work gradually on the creation of, of a complete erosion of the state, where the state would exist only formally. So that means that if the pro-Bosnian forces and the political West enter negotiation with him regarding the constitutional court and state property and so on, if they give in to him even for the inch, that's something we can expect, like gradual secession. Another option is not to give in to his demands. He might feel cornered, and with the inspiration of Russia and Serbia, he could start a violent secession. But there is also a way there is a way to prevent that. If the serious sanctions are imposed, that is, if the EU countries, with the exception of Hungary, because Hungary supports Milorad Dodik, if they introduce very strong financial bilateral sanctions to him and to all those who support them, if they strengthen the presence of NATO troops on the ground, but preventively, not to wait for the war to start and then to send the troops.
And I do want to speak about Kosovo for a minute. And if I want to understand, how are the recent events in Bosnia and Herzegovina linked, in your view, with what's been happening in Kosovo and the recent tensions in the area we were talking about a few weeks ago?
Yeah, well, the situation in Kosovo is, according to some American diplomats and those in charge of crisis in Kosovo, that it's linked with the crisis in Bosnia and Herzegovina, simply because it seems that so far the envoys in charge of the American policy for the Western Balkans are proposing a lot of pro-Serb policies to appease Serbia in order to turn it away from Russia, to kind of co-opt Serbia to the political West. So they're really giving in a lot. They introduced even sanctions on Kosovo in order to appease Serbia.
Right.
I'm afraid that they might be actually be prepared to negotiate with Dodik regarding the constitutional court and his demands to further erode state of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
We keep a close eye on that.
Just for the sake of keeping Serbia on their on the Western side.
Running out of time, surely still a lot to look out for in this very complicated region. Professor Edina Bećirović, thank you very much for joining us today. And that's it for this week. Thanks for watching and see you next time.